I'm Dr. Veronica Jow, and today I want to talk about something that doesn't usually make it into medical conversation, let alone a doctor's office. Silliness. This episode is called Silliness Saved Me, and I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean it very literally. So back in October 2020, I was not okay. I was trying to be a mom, run a business, practice medicine, and just be a human, all in the middle of a pandemic. I felt really scattered and overwhelmed and honestly pretty hopeless that things were gonna ever feel light again. So Halloween was coming up, and that's usually one of my favorite holidays. But I remember thinking, how do we preserve fun in a world that already feels terrifying? And so on a complete whim, I bought an inflatable Hello Kitty costume. I had no plan, no intention, no kind of wellness framework. I just clicked buy. So the idea was to surprise my kids during an outdoor candy scavenger hunt, which was going to be our alternative for trick-or-treating that year. But the joke was absolutely on me, trying to zip myself into what is essentially a deflated balloon and then attempting to walk down this narrow staircase without even being able to see my feet. Failing, trying to squeeze out my new sumo wrestler body through a doorway. I just started cracking up, like laughing, crying, the kind where your body takes over before your brain can stop it. But by the time I got outside, I had become the silliest Hello Kitty you've ever seen. And that's when I realized I could jump, I could twirl, I could dance inside the costume. It was like weirdly like a large space, and I thought I could set up an entire life in here. That's the moment something shifted. There was this freedom in being completely hidden inside this ridiculous balloon. No one could see my body, my face, my exhaustion. I didn't have to be a doctor, a business owner, or a mom. I didn't have to hold anything together. I was just moving. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the despair loosened its grip. So looking back on that, what I understand now is, as a physician, is that silliness did something very real to my nervous system. It didn't fix anything. It didn't solve my problems. It certainly didn't make the pandemic go away. But it created a relief. It interrupted the spiral. It reminded my body what it feels like to be alive without performing, proving, solving anything. I made a lot of countless Hello Kitty appearances since then at parties, street fairs, political fundraisers, and it never gets old. Once I'm in that inflated, silly kitty costume, I just go right back into that mode. And what's fascinating is that even after I take it off, the effects linger. The cloud lifts, my thinking gets clearer, I'm more creative, I'm more patient, and I feel more capable of handling the hard stuff. So silliness isn't escapism, it's a restoration of sorts. One of the most unexpected parts of this practice has been how contagious it is walking through downtown San Francisco as Hello Kitty. It reliably sparks so much joy, waves, people want to take photos, and that spans all ages and all demographics. So maybe kind of wonder, what if silliness is its own form of protest? Kind of a refusal to let systems, fear, pain, burnout rob us of joy. So especially when things feel so heavy right now, I've been reminding myself and the people around me to take silly breaks. Wear costumes, dance, tell bad jokes, jump on the trampoline, watch a ridiculous movie, sing a song. These aren't indulgences, these are lifelines. Okay, everybody, welcome. This is the Honest Doc segment of our podcast where I talk to one of my clinician friends about health and things that we wish more people knew. So we've been talking about silliness and fun and laughter in medicine, and that's why I wanted to bring on someone that I deeply, deeply respect. This is my dear friend, Dr. Hyman Scott, who is an infectious disease and HIV specialist and was actually a Time Doctor of the Year last year. Snaps. He works with some of the sickest and underserved people in our healthcare system. However, he is probably one of the most warm, funny, joyful people I know. So I really admire him, and I want to talk to him more about that. So, Dr. Scott, we're going to just start with you telling us a little bit about what you do and who you are.
So thank you for inviting me here. I'm excited to talk to you every time I get a chance to talk to you. So I'm a HIV and pre-exposure prophylaxis or PrEP doctor that works primarily within the health department in San Francisco, and also with some community-based organizations. And I do a lot of research as well on HIV prevention, types of PrEP, oral PrEP, injectable PrEP, and ways to help people access it easily.
Great. Yeah, you have a lot of aspects to your job. You see patients in clinic, but you also do research and lead teams. So you're all across the board. Yeah.
Yeah, it keeps life interesting.
Yeah, I think one thing people may not realize about HIV care is that it's really relationship based. Like some of your patients you've probably known for years or decades. Mm-hmm. And what do you love most about that part of the work?
I think that is really, for me, what drew me to HIV medicine was this opportunity to get really connected to our patients and to the community they come from. Mm-hmm. So we have, for a lot of our patients, we are their social support. And there's been a lot of stigma, a lot of isolation for a lot of our patients, a lot of trauma that they've experienced. And we really value the relationship that we have with them in ways that can help foster their so that, for me, HIV was this really nexus of connection and relationship, and also medicine. That's what really attracted me to it.
Yeah, that's great, because I think a lot of people would be scared off by that, and some people think that HIV is not even something that we have to deal with in the community anymore. But that's not true, right?
Yeah, that is definitely not true. We went from, in the late 80s, early 90s, when I think there was really, people were dying. You know, we had people who were my age who lost 75% of their friends. Like, I couldn't imagine what that would have been like. Like, 75% of your friends in their 20s, 30s. It's got to be tremendously traumatic. But that's thankfully not happening, because we have new medications that work really well, are really well tolerated. And now when I have a 25-year-old, for example, diagnosed with HIV, I tell them that there's no reason for you to change any of your life plans. Mm-hmm. Yes, you're going to have to navigate your health and other relationships probably a little bit differently, but you're going to live a normal lifespan, and you can do all the things that you've always wanted. Mm-hmm. And that's really dramatic and inspiring, and really helpful to be able to say that to our patients when they are diagnosed, and also to empower them around some of the stigma, because I think in the past it was a death sentence. Mm-hmm. And that's just not the case anymore. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, now it's not in the media. People aren't talking about these traumas that are happening around losing people in their community. So there's a complacency that exists. But we've had the same number of HIV diagnoses for over a decade.
Really?
Yeah. And, it doesn't get discussed. It doesn't get talked about. No. And it's hit in certain communities harder than other communities. Those are also communities that are marginalized in other ways. And so it just really is kind of under the radar, but it's still there.
Well, one of the things that always stands out to me about you is your joyful demeanor. And you are dealing with some of the sickest and most challenging patients. How do you maintain that attitude?
That's a good question. I think one of the things that I always try to find is the connection with my patients and with people I'm talking to. And, that connection often is around joy and laughter. So I spend a lot of my time just trying to figure out like what's going on with people's lives before we get into any of their health things. Mm. So just simple questions like what are you doing on the weekend? Like, did you travel? Like, what's going on in your life? And so I always start my visits like, how are you doing? Open-ended, let my patients sort of like talk about where they go. And then I listen, right? And I don't speak. And I let them share. Mm-hmm. And then I pay attention to what they're talking about. And I keep track of the things that they tell me. And then the next time I see them, I bring it up. It's like, hey, you talked about this last time. How's that going for you? And then it just builds this relationship so that, a lot of my staff, like, after my visits, they're like, you all are so loud laughing in there. And I was like, yeah, because we were having a good time and we were talking about things and hearing about things. And I was hearing about what's going on with them. And I was telling them what's going on with me? And, I think it makes it more interesting and fun. And for me, going to clinic is a recharging opportunity. So I go to clinic and I like see all these people that I like talking to.
Wow.
And so it's like a really, we get into the health things. And my job as their provider is to help them navigate through towards wellness. And thankfully with HIV medications now for most people, that is not the number one or two or three things that they have to deal with. And so we can talk about other things and like sort of can meet people where they are. And it's just a really amazing opportunity. So I feel really honored to be able to share that with my patients. And I respect that they're willing and open to sharing that with me.
That's really cool perspective. I mean, you just basically treat them like your friends.
Yeah.
Because I feel that. I feel like you're always listening to me and that you're always checking in and you remember a lot of the things I say. So
yeah,
that's really cool. So in this episode, I was talking a lot about silliness and kind of spontaneous laughter. Now, you can have that maybe with your patients, but how does that play out in the rest of the clinic when you're there?
I think I take the same approach with everyone. So I sort of check in how people are doing. And, there are often opportunities to make small jokes in different ways. And so I take that opportunity to say things, that are, might catch a joke from a staff member or even a patient. So one of my biggest things when someone's leaving is like, be careful out in these streets because, things can get rough. And, and I actually have had patients want to come into my clinic because they see how I interact with my patients in the waiting room. So, I would just make a little joke about something in the waiting room in front of everyone because I'm just like, that's just kind of how we navigate things. So, one of my patients asked me one time, I was like, hey, you ready to go? Ready to visit? He's like, oh, are you ready? I was like, I'm always ready. And so it's just like that kind of thing.
The one-liners.
Yeah, just like, it's very small, but it leaves an impression on people. And I find that that's like more kind of like how I interact. And that's kind of like how I grew up. And, my family, you have to have a thick skin and a sharp tongue. And so you got to really stay on top of things. And I think knowing when and reading people's body language. Like if someone has something that they're carrying, it often shows up in nonverbal ways. So I try to pay attention to like, are my patients showing up in a different way today? So, I can check in and say, hey, what's going on? Things seem different because I've been paying attention to the other visits. So that really for me is like kind of the art of medicine that I really enjoy. And it allows a connection. It allows the complexity. It allows the interaction and the joy and the fun that it is of like getting the privilege of taking care of people.
That's really special. Why do you think that's not the norm in doctor-patient relationships?
That's a good question. I think that sometimes the systems put pressures on the interactions that don't allow that to happen. So if you have to see 40 patients in a half day and you have 10 minutes with everyone and you have to do all the paperwork and you have to like check all the labs and also make the referral, like it just doesn't leave space for that.
Right.
And that's what I really enjoyed about doing HIV medicine is that is still centered in terms of the care that we provide people. So there's more space for that. So I think if I was in other areas, I might not have the opportunity to do that in the same way. And so that's why I feel privileged and honored to be able to provide this care in this type of setting where I can really sort of practice medicine in the ways that really center our patients as a center and that allows us to like have joyful, long-lasting relationships.
I love that. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I opened this clinic is because I was in the 10-minute visit world and
it's not fun.
It's not fun. It's hard to be your fun self when you're limited on time.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people just experience chronic stress and it leads to poor health. How do you see the emotional burden that your patients are carrying affecting their health?
It shows up in a variety of ways. I think one of the biggest ways I see is that sometimes my patients, because I've known them for so long, they go through periods where there's more things going on. And we are very attentive to things that are going on, particularly because our patients sometimes are at higher risk for complications as related to their HIV. And then we'll do extensive workups and like not find out anything going on. And so then we get to the point of like, you've had this complaint, we take it seriously, we're not ignoring it, we're trying to figure out what's going on. And then, it gets to this like, oh, I've been really anxious about this thing, I've been really stressed about this thing, I've been really troubled by, something that's going on. I think with a lot of the things that have been happening in the world, particularly around my patients who are marginalized in some way and are like sort of on the edge of like food insecurity or housing instability, a lot of the things that are happening are showing up in their body, and they're showing up as their stress in their chest pain and headaches and and numbness and tingling in ways, and abdominal symptoms that are real for them. Like, even if they have a cause that's not from something that I can diagnose with a CT scan, it doesn't make it any less real for them. And I remind them, like, yeah, these are real symptoms for you. Even if the CT scan is negative, it doesn't mean that you're not experiencing it. But it might be that the cause of it is something else that we need to work on.
Right, and people get this, oh, you think it's all in my head kind of reaction. And it can be hard to explain, like, even if it is, it's real, you know?
Yeah, and I remember in medical school, I think, or residencies, one of the GI gastroenterologists was telling me about like the number of nerves that exist in the GI system is like similar to the number of nerves that are in the spinal cord. Wow. And so you think about like, our bodies are wired in ways that things can show up. And the experience of pain is very subjective, right? It's not just whether or not this injury occurred, it's about how you experience it. And I think when you center around people like that, then it helps them to understand that, like, even if it is something that doesn't have a cause that we can see on a picture that we take, that it's still real for you, and we still care about your well-being, and we still want to help you and get to a place of wellness. And I think that that's also the relationship piece of it. So then they trust you. They know that you're an ally in their health.
On the same team,
right?
Yeah. Well, I want to shift gears a minute and talk about something really tragic that recently happened to you and your coworkers, where a social worker was taken by violence. And I don't want you to relive that painful experience, but I know you had to go back to work, and that was a choice you made.
Yeah.
How did you do that? How did you go back to the workplace and still have a sense of joy and purpose?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So I actually did therapy. I started therapy, which was extremely helpful. I think I've never experienced something as awful as that occurred. And I took some time off, and I took some space. And I had actually some genuine curiosity about how I would feel going back into that space. And so I really listened and worked closely with the therapist that I was working with around, like, going back and trying to see what it was like to be there, to see if I could actually ever go back, because I wasn't sure that I could ever go back. And so I went on a different day, and I went with my partner, and it was closed. And I was not sure how much space that event was going to take up when I went there, and so I wanted to sort of see what that was going to be like. And what I was experienced was actually that the many years of positive, joyful experiences that I had took up more space than that awful, terrible event that we're still grieving for. And I think that was somewhat of a surprise to me, that like so much joy came back, going back to a place where I had such a relatively recent awful experience. And so I think that for me was confirmation around how like practicing medicine was really a space that helped me. And honestly, it helped me heal. Seeing my patients afterwards and them talking about it, and they're concerned for my well-being, that kind of thing. Like if the tables were turned, and as like someone who's been a caregiver, receiving that care back is sometimes challenging.
Definitely.
And I think just being open and gracious and honoring that these people who are part of my life as, a doctor-patient relationship have care. And I had one patient who called me and was, just because many of my patients have my cell phone number, because we I help them navigate things that it's helpful for me to be in touch with them afterwards. And, he just said, I'm just calling to check in on you. I heard what happened. And it's really awful. And, I was like, well, how are you doing? He's like, no, don't worry about me. Like, I'm worried about you. And it was just really like heartfelt to hear that. So.
That's cool. I hear two things. One is, joy, building up a joy bank is actually resilience for those times when, that was a serious tragedy, but even for little mini traumas, right? Yeah. And also that you really allowed yourself to receive care, which is something that is hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for a lot of doctors to just be on the other side.
Yeah.
And we constantly feel like we have to be solving people's problems, and it becomes like override sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I'm really proud of you.
Thank you. Yeah, I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about, just a lot about giving myself more grace than I think I'm used to.
Yes, I think we all need that. And, for people that are listening that might be going through something hard, everybody's experienced something, illness, burnout, stress. What would you want them to know about the role of humor or lightness in getting through difficult times?
I think it has a place. I think you want to be true to yourself around it. And I think that laughter and joy should be a part of your life in general, because then that can help you to recharge and balance out some of these things that are happening. I think you reference this event. It was terrible and it was sad and there was a lot of grief. And then I knew I was healing when I could start to laugh again. I knew I was healing when I could find the joy in the things that I usually found joy. And so I think that it's really important to, as you said, fill that bank with joy and laughter. And as you come back to it, it really can help bolster when you're having something that is worth grieving. That's part of our life.
Right. We can't get away from that, right? Yeah. So I have a final question for you. Actually, I have two more questions. But one is, what do you do in the middle of your workday to, you're with your patients, but what do you do to kind of get through the day in a way that you can maintain that sense of joy?
I think one is I try to get a little bit of space. So I usually go out during the day whenever I'm going to get lunch, for example. And I just go for a walk and I get out of the clinical space for a period of time. It doesn't have to be long, but I just go for a walk. And then also I try to find opportunities to sort of make jokes and be this playful banter with staff as well as patients and participants. So that for me is really fun. So there was a meeting we had, for example, and we're doing our research study and we're a little bit delayed in getting started. And there's a few other sites that are also getting started. And so, I'm making this pitch that we need to move things faster. And then one of the staff members was like, oh, so we're behind. And I was like, no, they're just ahead of us. And so I was like, it's all about how you center and make the perspective. And they were writing it on the board, what's the difference between being behind and then being ahead of us? And it's about where you center yourself. Yeah. And so I try to do that in as many opportunities and ways as I can. Just if I see someone in the waiting room, just check in and see how they're doing. And just those small opportunities to make a connection.
So I think that's an important reminder that, joy and laughter are not just about distracting us. They're actually part of the healing. And, we want everyone that's listening to find their own set of healing, laughter, and silliness that they can provide. So my last question for you is, what is your favorite silly moment, either with me or, just from the last few years?
I think my favorite silly moment, you probably don't even remember this. I think we were at Portola and I can't remember exactly what triggered it, but you had this very joyful giggle, and both, I think me and then one or two other people we were with, comments, I've never heard Veronica laugh like that before. And it was like just a visceral kind of like joyful silliness giggle that I had never heard you do before.
I love
and
it.
I actually haven't heard it since. This is like a year and a half ago.
I need to get to work then.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how the planets aligned for that to happen, but it was memorable.
Oh, I love that.
My favorite.
Well, my favorite silly moment with you actually is also Portola, but it was the first time we went. That's a music festival for people who don't know. Our first time we went, Hyman is usually very poised and well put together, and he agreed to let me dress him up. So I got to pick costumes, and I put him in cute shorts and a fun hat and a sparkly vest, and we were just like two silly doctors roaming around.
My siblings saw that picture, and they were like, "Who did you go with that you allowed to dress you like that?" I was like, "One and only Veronica."
That's how we know we're good friends, right? We can laugh together, we can cry together, we can dress up together.
100%.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing all of that. It was really powerful, and I hope everyone that's listening thinks about fun and laughter in a different way now, and maybe even the doctor-patient relationship, as a give and take. We want to be in it with them. So maybe my next patient will be telling some jokes. I don't know. All right. Thank you so much.